We are live. So today, maybe let's start with Ben and then go up. There aren't many people today. So it's-
All right, sure. So, yeah, this is a where to start? I actually consider this, that he has the first paragraph here. Um, you know, Anyone can run a node on their computer and verify the chain is correct. I think this is, one of the core, innovations that Satoshi came up with. Um, was this sort of mass replication or ability to join the network and just run your own node. Um, and I think that's actually like very interesting. It is up there with economic finality, which is actually sort of tied into this, and the ability to both verify that a chain is correct and verify that it is sort of Sybil resistant because money has been spent on it, so you can't just spin up another chain that is also correct. Um, But I think that is the core of everything with the Verge, and well, I think actually a major pillar of chains. If users can't actually do that, then I don't think you're actually gaining anything from a blockchain. Um, People need to be able to verify that they've been paid effectively without having to trust you. Otherwise, you really are just a bank. Um, so, actually doing that, and that turns out to be an interesting problem. Satoshi sort of picked on the easy, dumb solution, which is all right, everyone verifies everything, everyone replicates everything, everyone's like a cell in the body. They just keep a complete, set of DNA, complete set of data, and then everything is right because you've double checked it. Um, and that is sort of an extremely simple way of doing it. Unfortunately, the hard part is that's very expensive. Um, and it really comes down to what the cost of that is. And the cost of that is, if you wanted to capture all the world's transactions, it's very significant. It's not something you could do. Um, so the whole battle of the past, couple of decades has been how do we change that cost? How do we deal with the fact that, how do the cost for a full verification can be quite high? How do we, make that easier? Um, and it turns out, this was unknown in Satoshi's time, but it is actually possible to do all sorts of weird stuff with, proofs, Merkle proofs, Stark's zero knowledge proofs. This was not existent in 2008. But the idea being, you have the chain state. It is whatever size it is. You do a lot of math and cryptography and stuff, and you end up with something that's like so simple you could verify it on your phone, and as so long as you trusted the proof system, you know that the chain was correct. Um, and this is possible today. I think there are some L1s that do that. The problem is this is very rapidly growing technology. A decade ago, it was it didn't really exist. And I suspect that it'll take a decade or two. Sure. This is probably equivalent, if not more so, in difficulty than sort of the original cryptographic work that was done in like the 70s and 80s, just to get to the point where you could have encrypted messages and public key cryptography, which really came out in the 90s. So this is easily that level of work. I wouldn't expect this stuff to be done, or at least capture 90% of the value of what could be done here until like 2030, 2040-ish. Um, but I think this is extremely interesting from a technical perspective and from just because this doesn't necessarily have to be done by a blockchain. You could hypothetically have any system, even if it's completely trusted or at least completely centralized to the point where someone could still provide a proof that hey, we have a real rule about how balances are supposed to update or whatever, or some system, and we quickly verify that it's correct, and you can just easily check that. Um, I've heard this, applied to voting and so on. That I don't want to get too much into that. The hard part with voting is always that the point of voting is to try to generate legitimacy, which means that the average person needs to be able to not only understand but understand at a deep level and trust that hey, the way this voting makes sense and is fair. And getting this tech to that level would be, a century-long work, if not more. Just even various slight changes to the voting system that's different than first past the post is already extremely difficult. So I'm not way holding my breath on. But as for the actual details of this, most of the stuff is like how do we hammer our system? Because Ethereum does have, say, one downside in that they're trying to do very general stuff, which means that the cryptographic proofs become much more difficult. You sort of need to prove the operation of the EVM, which is sort of like an arbitrary thing. So it gets nasty pretty quickly. It's why they haven't just cranked something out. It kind of turns out this is a very difficult problem, and there's lots of different approaches, none of which are sort of amazing, at least not yet. This is a year old post, so things might be considerably better. I'm not state of the art in this. I've just been sort of following along. Um, but basically, it's about picking different technical parameters that can we do this in a way that gets what we want, which is the ability to very easily verify the chain, not by downloading everything, but by looking at some mathematical proof that hey, this chain is valid, and going with that. I had one other minor point I want to make is that he talks about staking costs or ease of like solo staking, and I think that's a bit of a red herring. I mean, the cost to staking is always going to be primarily the lockup cost of the relatively large amount of capital. Um, so I don't think, making it easier. I mean, as someone who has, set up nodes for people to stake, it is a big pain in the ass, and making that easier would be nice. Um, Especially when it, fills up the disk and then you have to trying to debug that. That's certainly not fun. But I don't think it's the bottleneck. I think the cost to run a node could be zero, and it still would be quite difficult to stake because you still need to lock up a good amount of money for a long time. And as such, I don't think this actually solves the problem with liquid staking and delegated staking and stuff. That said, I mean anything that makes running a node easier is good because the ability to very quickly and easily verify the chain is sort of one leg of all the security properties of the system, and in fact is actually sort of almost a general technology that can be applied to anything. And the hard part is getting people to actually use it, but making it easy as possible. But I suspect that won't happen for another maybe within our lifetimes, probably not too closer than that. Just because this is it's the technology is not even finished yet, and then it has to be adopted and diffused, and people actually have to demand it, and that's going to be a while. Anyway, I think I will pass on. I guess I'm passing up to Anraj.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, the first pass, like the first reaction was this seems really a lot of work, and like let's say if it takes too long, uh, to like get some of this implemented, then some new technology might come. So I don't know how much of future of Ethereum depends on it, because some of my actual interest in Ethereum is coming from like the light client research and decentralization part. So I don't know much about like technically, but like the long term research gives me some hope that like even if I'm learning it at a slow rate, that I could do something in this field. So in 2 years ago, when I was in Istanbul, I had heard about this Mina protocol blockchain. I think their single block is about like 2 kilobytes or something, and it's like one of the lightest blockchains there is. They were like giving out like small demos there in Istanbul, uh, and I was also thinking about like how Bitcoin kind of is becoming more and more centralized. So even though you could run a node, I think I had seen some posts on Twitter that like that nobody is actually transacting anymore, and everybody is just holding it. So there is not much transaction fees. And then with every halving, I think the reward goes down, so the security budget is decreasing. So that was something was like came to my mind. And yeah, those were some initial thoughts. Passing on to Anand. Anand, we can't hear you if you're speaking. Okay, maybe we can.
Can you hear?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Had a issue with my headphones. Yeah, I was saying, like like a lot of other Vitalik's technical articles, it's kind of deceptively simple to me. As you know, as I read through it, it gives me a notion that I understand what's going on. But especially when he's calculating all these sort of bytes for storage and transfer, and he's kind of doing computations at a bit operator level and talking about benefits and so on and so forth. Uh, it makes me think that the math is not as complex as much as the machinery of everything coming together is quite complex. So I mean, I have an appreciation for the complexity, but I obviously don't understand, and obviously can't verify. Maybe at some point, this might be some possibilities, but just wanted to sort of share that at the top. Second thing is like sort of I think ETTO, the efficiency thoroughness trade-off, has been on top of my mind, and sort of especially when evaluating like technical decisions. It seems like this article, I think it states it somewhere at the top of the article that this Verge, as part of his like merge, surge, and Verge. Seems like the Verge is about resource maximization and efficiency maximization of like a blockchain, and I guess stateless validation is part of that, where you increase the diversity of devices that can sort of verify the blockchain in a sort of resource efficient way. I mean, those are edge devices are often resource constrained. So it seems like that is the theme for Verge, and the tension I kind of spotted is, I mean, I guess it's very obvious, is that uh, I suppose when the words the term was coined, Verkle trees was considered to be the sort of main mechanic, like mechanism that you use to uh, do stateless validations, or like use it in mempools and inclusion lists and whatever else it can be used in. But like Vitalik notices, like it seems Starks, again, beyond the name, I have very little understanding of the math behind it, but Starks, it seems, is like more quantum resistant, and Verkle trees are not. I mean, Verkle trees and subsequent proofs are not. So that is an interesting sort of boundary condition to think about when you think of this roadmap and its feasibility to execute on it. Uh, and the reason I mentioned that is also it seems like the sort of the research and the effort it's going to take to understand Starks and its relevance and its sort of security properties to make this happen is very nascent stage. And Ben mentioned like it's like maybe 2030 or 2040, and I'm not even I mean, I can't say I'm not confident, but it seems like it's a much more longer term project. Especially like when he's talking about like changing many parts of the state machine, so to speak. Like if you want to change the data structure and want to move around, I think he mentions like transaction lit receipt tree and like few other structures. So if you want to swap all of that to make it Stark friendly, in order to be quantum resistant, it seems like there's a lot of complexities involved, and also the ability to sort of carry through with these proposals, I highly doubt it. I mean, we kind of talked about it at Surge. It seems like at least if the idea was to improve the transaction throughput and increase the volume of transactions, I can see there's a lot of consensus in the sort of ecosystem for that, and can relatively, maybe not easily, but there's some path to implementation and sort of support for that. But many pieces of this is entirely assuming that Ethereum is like a world computer, and that you need like every smartwatch and phone to be a light client verifying Ethereum blockchain. So this seems like the grand vision, grand Web3 vision of sort of rewiring all network connectivity and computations through the network with the blockchain. Uh, it seems, I mean, I think somebody mentioned that we can get a little science fictiony in some of the other blog posts. This seems like quite out there for me, especially given if I include the boundary condition of Ethereum, ETH, the asset, which ultimately underwrites all of the security in this, and that asset is sort of getting increasingly legibility. I suppose with like different hedge funds and sovereign funds and so many other people allocating more and more into that asset. So in, that seems like a lot of entrenching. And to Raj's point, like it could be that the centralization forces in Ethereum could be as strong as the Bitcoin, and that sort of the ability to carry through with this and the sort of ecosystem support needed for this is I'm not sure. The other thing that occurred to me, relating it to Surge, especially Verge, is like how much of that is like the core uh, L1. I suppose there could be another layer of abstraction on top where you can implement all of this, and you could all have like a sort of centralized L1 or relatively centralized L1, perhaps. I don't know. Uh, But yeah, I mean, this seems all too far out in the future for me to have any sort of immediate appreciation for of how relevant it is in the next sort of 3 to 5 years. The other thing I would mention is that my interest in these systems is sort of blockchains. It seems like and a good techno-economic systems for building sort of I guess like internet native or computer native applications and uh, a lot of interest in the ecosystem is not that, so I don't know how to reconcile with that. So I have many more questions in my head. I've rambled on. I'll stop here and I will pass it to Jenna.
Yeah, it's always heartwarming to me that no one else really understands it. But I think at a top level, it's not that hard to see what they're trying to do here. And I appreciated, I think it was Anant that brought up that Bitcoin has become basically a repository, but Ethereum is really going hard at it's meant to be used. And I brought up before, I'm watching what's going on with this microtransactions and tipping on mostly on Forecaster. So the gabillions, that's a tsunami of transactions that all need to get rolled up, and it's like, what the hell? So the one specific example that I think is relevant today is there was an amps hack over the weekend. I'll drop the two links from Horsefax that I thought were interesting. So anytime you've got this sort of sophisticated contract stuff going on, the susceptibility to like one dumb mistake, which apparently was what this one was, seems just huge to me. How do you, I think I used this metaphor before, how do you build the battleship and keep it safe while it's already out at sea carrying a gabillion dollars of people's stuff? The amps one was trivial in the sense that it was, I think it was less than $10,000 were stolen, so that's the good news. But if it's until it's not no longer easy to make a stupid mistake, do you blame the bad actors or do you blame the people who kind of made a dumb mistake in their contract? This problem is not going to go away, and the cat and mouse game that's going on is not going to go away. The other thing I'll mention about Vitalik's piece itself is at the top of the page, it's like, we want an easy way to be able to do this on your smartwatch. And then if you get to the bottom, it says, well, yeah, and it is years and years away. So, so it's, I think I assume he understands that and he's trying to shoot the gap between making it look doable while not hiding the fact that it's going to be hard. Um, um, there was one more piece about that. Well, I'll pass to the group now. If I think of it, I'll jump back in. Yeah,
Venk,
Venkat, you're here. Say anything.
if you want to speak or are on listen mode, maybe Venkat is on listen mode. Any more thoughts? Seems not short call today, but we'll see in 2 weeks again. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.